Tonight in RFL, tell me if this sounds familiar. The fiscal cliff countdown continues. President Obama cutting his vacation short, returning to D.C. today, hoping to play Let's Make a Deal. But many are asking if he even should. Which party's got the upper hand in the fight over taxes and spending? And does anyone really know where the grand old party stands as we speak? And next, guns in America and yet another bloody headline. Firefighters in upstate New York lured to a blaze only to be targeted by an ex-con with an assault rifle. What has America learned since Newtown? And later, the guns both near you and your loved ones. A newspaper in our region has made national headlines today by printing the names and addresses of every gun owner with a permit. Is that fair warning or unfair disclosure? And the NRA's call for armed guards in every school. Do you want somebody with a gun watching over your kids? We're going to get into all that, everyone, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Good evening, though, and welcome to RFL. Hope you all had a happy holidays. I'm Richard French. Well, it is Wednesday evening, December 26th, and we're going to get into those debates. Plus, remember actors both Jack Klugman and Charles Durning and the spirit of the season. Some random acts of kindness helping spread the Christmas cheer where it's needed most. But let's begin with that fiscal cliff. It has been the single-minded focus of the political world since the hours after the election. You know, just think about all the stuff that's come your way since early November. You've got Thanksgiving, you had Black Friday, you had Cyber Monday, Hanukkah, office holiday parties, Christmas movies, and today at the mall, clearance sales and returns. But in D.C., it's been cliff, and yes, more cliff, but still no deal in place and seemingly not even close. We are slated to go over the edge this Tuesday. Let me bring in now my friends Dominic Carter and Andrew Whitman. And Andrew, any signs here for optimism as we get closer to that deadline?
You know, there are reasons to be hopeful and lots of reasons not to be, Rich. President Obama is on his way back to Washington tonight so he can hammer out a deal with Republicans. But just because the president is coming back to his house doesn't mean he's any closer to a deal with the GOP's house. During President Obama's vacation in Hawaii, he spent part of his Christmas day greeting and thanking service members.
Thank you for the extraordinary work.
Knowing that the military is facing some of the steepest cuts if the country goes over the fiscal cliff on New Year's Day. The president is giving it one last shot, cutting short his vacation and returning to Washington to try to hammer out a last-minute deal with congressional Republicans. But if there's no breakthrough before New Year's Day, every American will be hit with higher taxes. A school teacher with 2 kids and a salary of $43,000, for example, will face a tax hike of more than $3 grand. The super rich, like LeBron James, who makes roughly $53 million a year, would see his taxes go up more than $2.4 million next year.
I want us to not go over the cliff because I think if we do, it hurts our economy and it hurts our country.
Middle-class people shouldn't have their taxes go up an average of $2,000 a year, and we also should start making some meaningful reform on the debt.
Going over the fiscal cliff means more than higher taxes. Federal workers are at risk of being furloughed. Unemployment benefits for some 2 million people would expire. Not to mention, many economists say the nation would fall back into a recession. There are reports Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is now working on a smaller deal than the comprehensive one the president negotiated with House Speaker John Boehner. That deal, the one reportedly being worked on by Boehner and Reid, would stop the cliff's tax hikes on families earning less than $250,000 a year and would cut some government spending, but that would likely only be a short-term stopgap measure, and it's not even clear if that would have enough Republican support to pass through Congress. Meanwhile, House Republicans telling reporters this afternoon that no matter what comes of any ongoing talks, the House will not vote for any deal before Friday afternoon. Meaning with just 3 days between a possible vote on Friday and the cliff, which we arrive at on Tuesday, this, as we all expected, will likely come down to the wire. Rich?
And Andrew, just give me the over-unders here. Most people in Washington who thought, oh, we'll have a deal, I think the odds are more likely than not we won't.
I think so, but I don't think it's overwhelmingly so. If I had to give odds, I'd say 60-40 that we go over, 40% odds that we come up with some sort of short-term fix that at least puts off the penalizing portions of the cliff before we get to January 1st.
Okay. Andrew, thank you very much. Okay, let's bring our panel, see what they say about this. We're joined tonight by Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, and whether he likes it or not, now a member of the media, and Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew, who you've met here. All right, Richard, Andrew already talked about the odds or lack thereof we go over. I could make three options the president has. One is conventional wisdom that he'll capitulate on something, try and work out a deal. It may not be a beautiful thing here or a temporary one, and just get us over, get us to 1231, past it with some form of a tax deal. Maybe they settle it for $500,000 or whatever. Don't tackle the really tough stuff till February or something like that. Second option is some people say, hey, kick the can down the road altogether for another year. Basically what you'll do is you'll extend everybody's tax cuts, you'll keep almost all your spending here, and finally here you'll make sure nobody screws with you in the debt limit for 12 months. And then finally the third option, which is go over the cliff. And the argument is, come January 1, forget that the polls say that you, Mr. President, have a higher approval rating than the other side, and the public likes your ideas more than the other side. But you hold all the cards in January 1. Put it in a bill at 12:01 in the morning and say, here, I want to now...
You're describing a dynamic where the president is negotiating with himself, which you can never win. So I would not pose this in terms of what the president can negotiate. Look, the Republicans are in chaos. They cannot produce a governing majority for anything. And until that's problem solved, nothing's going to happen. But everybody should take a deep breath. This is not falling off a cliff. This is bungee jumping off a cliff. Everyone's going to go down, and then
that was a good line, by the way. That was pretty good. Who'd you lift that up from?
Was that a good line?
It was pretty good. It was pretty good.
How am I doing? The point of it being that the core of what's wrong here is that the Republican Party cannot make up its mind whether it wants to govern from a minority perspective, that is, its Tea Party minority, or from the perspective of a governing majority, which has certain responsibilities. Till that's resolved, nothing's going to happen.
Okay, but the president, unlike last year at this same time, has, I think, a major chip to play where he says, hey, listen, come January 1, everybody's taxes are going to go up, and you're going to have deep cuts across the board to all these programs, including my Republican friends, to defense. What I can do is I can start putting bills here where you're going to have to say no to freezing rates for 98% of Americans.
They don't have to vote on anything as long as they control the majority.
They don't, but there's a PR value.
There's a value to their position politically in that when you're in their position, they can vote for things that are all tax cuts. If to vote in 2012, it appears as though they're letting taxes rise. In 2013, this same vote will appear as a tax cut.
Dominic, John Boehner, do you at this point feel bad for the guy? Or do you say, this guy, A, can't count votes, and he obviously can't control his caucus here. Has he screwed this thing up, or nobody can control some of the wild cards in his deck?
Speaker Boehner finds himself between a rock and a hard place. That old saying, he just can't win. One, in every caucus, whether it's a city council caucus, an assembly caucus, a congressional caucus, you're going to have a few loonies. You're going to have a few people.
Hey.
You're going to have a few loonies. Like, for example, the New York City Council caucus. But a speaker's job, and to have a whip, is to be able to whip those folks into place and deliver those votes. So Speaker Boehner has failed. At least count those votes. But you're supposed to be able to whip them into place, even if a lawmaker doesn't agree with them. So he has failed in that manner, period.
Yikes. Isn't this the guy I was telling you about dysfunctional Albany? 3 men in a room? Turns out Albany
is very dysfunctional.
And Washington is the way to go? Look, if you want the rank and file to control the outcome, you can't stand up and pound the table and yell, we need a strong speaker. You can have it one way, or you can have it the other. You can't have it both.
But isn't that really where we are in politics right now? I mean, in olden days, you would have seen the sides giving a little bit on some of their most prized issues on something like taxes, because it's for the benefit of the country to do so. But nowadays, people want their party leaders to hold firm to their party's positions.
Always wanted that,
no, but House Republicans are anti-taxes. They were elected on an anti-tax platform.
See,
so aren't the House Republicans honoring what the voters have asked them to do?
This way. This isn't nearly as tough as everybody's making out to be. The only guy who's got to figure out what he wants to do with his life is John Boehner. In that, right now they're passing this basically to the Senate. President and the Senate can work something out. They'll get it through. They can find 5, 6, 7 Republican votes here so they can hit the 60 mark. It'll go back to the House. By then, Boehner's got to figure out he's going to find 50 Republicans who want to be employed longer term and say, guys, forget this.
But
We're going to lose this fight, just come over.
That's just the problem, because those House Republicans, those 50 who need to just go along to get along, are going to face a primary challenge in their home districts, which are very conservative, because those are the only districts that elect Republicans continuously these
What's
days.
their choice?
And they're going to have to explain to voters why they voted for a tax increase.
It's worse than that. What you're really saying to Boehner is, as the Republican Speaker, you have to govern with essentially the Democratic Party producing the majority of the votes. That is not the model of leadership that has worked since
What other choice
Newt
does he
Gingrich.
have?
Well, here's one area that Richard is correct about. And
Nobody's got, what's the other option?
But no, here's the other option, and he's 1,000% correct about this. You stall until after January 1st. Thus, you can say you never voted for a tax increase. And that's a major sticking point. It's just talking words, a difference of words amongst us, but for a Republican, you can say he's 1,000% correct about that you didn't vote for a tax increase.
The taxes go up December 31st because of a vote that took place 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You then, in January, fix it for everyone you can fix it for.
And one more thing to consider for the president, which is if he goes over the cliff and we stay over the cliff for a little bit, you're going to have all this competing sound about how it's, the Republicans complaining it's the White House's fault, the White House complaining it's Republicans'
They're
fault.
going to blame the Republicans.
Yeah, but I'm not sure
Everybody's
I
gonna get
believe
tired.
those polls, because it doesn't measure the intensity of how they feel or how they're going to vote on it, or if this is something they're going to vote on. I have a feeling if we go over the cliff and stay over for a while, it's going to be a pox on both their
Just remember
hands.
one thing. There was something that happened a little different, which is John Boehner he did the Democrats the biggest favor he could ever do. Tried to bring a bill to the table to say, we're going to basically reduce taxes on anybody not making $1 million. And that wasn't even good enough for Republicans. So now the optic to the general public is they're going to take us over the cliff to protect millionaires. And that can fit on a bumper sticker.
Depends on how long it goes.
Maybe.
When we had this fight with Pataki or Cuomo, be the Senate or the Assembly, in the end, the poll numbers showed on the governor as much as they did on the House.
And did people vote on it?
I got to hit a break here, guys. When we
years
come
later.
back, we are going to talk about guns and trying to make some sense of the latest senseless gun tragedy as once again, madman with his hands on a semi-automatic weapon with deadly consequences. Plus, in surprising numbers from the latest polls when it comes to gun and gun violence. Please, everyone, stay with us.